Simulations have ruined DFS. It's time to get back to our hand builder ways, get our hands in the dirt, construct some rosters, identify the best plays, and build them into a winning lineup. That's what we're going to do today. We got the non-stop DFS action for the next 3.5 hours. We're going to kick it off with Block Party with my partner in crime, JMToWin. Or is he Zorro? Is he a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle? Only you will be able to decipher that in a few minutes. We will then have Bully the Sims, an operative word on Bully this week with Youdacao after that. And then we'll wrap up with Off and On the Clock, the underdog preview with John and Nez. I'm Pete. Let's load it up.
Peter's one of the greatest depositors I've ever seen.
Trust the process. Let's go.
I got auto match with Levitan. Bullshit.
I just go the other way. In that 66, I win all the money. All the money.
If I had 150 lineups, I'd win too.
AP, crack spot, bullets in your head like KD. Bust it, bitch, go bust it. And I had 10 pints with me in Russia.
Hey, everyone.
All right. Hey, everyone. Indeed. Happy Halloween. JMToWin. How you doing?
Doing well, man. I think you just wore that outfit to show off the guns. Can we see them again? Yeah, there we go. So I got a story for you. So
yeah.
My son, they had a little Halloween festival last night. He's 6 years old.
Yeah.
And he was dressing up as a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle riding a dinosaur. So he had like a dinosaur costume. It like goes on his legs, you know? And so my wife had this mask for him. He said, Mom, that'll embarrass me.
That's where he draws the line.
So turtle with some swords and a dinosaur outfit, but no mask. So I got the mask this morning. I'm gonna push it up, so we can take us somewhat seriously. But yeah, we're here. We're ready. We're ready to rock and roll. If you're watching this on Saturday, we are recording this on Halloween, so there is a reason for the costumes. But yeah. Let's maybe bring some seriousness too. Bring some good information and some money making stuff this week.
Yeah, we were talking right before the show how unfortunate it was last week. We're talking about Lamar, his big return. Love that spot for him against the Bears. And then we get the whole slate flipped on its head. He's ruled out. A lot of people were talking about Drake London in that game. He's ruled out. Everything, thrown in disarray. So we're going to do our best to keep you guys up to date on all of the latest news and notes. There are a few tricky spots this week. Obviously, the Joe Flacco status, the Ramondre Stevenson status is kind of an interesting one as that pertains to the Patriots running game. But as usual, I'll have my news feed up and pass along anything actionable here. But JM, how did your week, what week is it? Week 8. How did your week 8 go?
Yeah, so the thought on Lamar Jackson last week was it was a slate full of uncertainty. And I didn't think it was going to be a high scoring week. And so it was like, where is the highest confidence spot on the slate, right? So after we lost Lamar, to me, the highest confidence spots moved over to Jalen Hurts and Bo Nix. And then I was also big on like the pairings of Troy Franklin plus Marvin Mims and Dallas Goedert plus Devontae Smith and Devon Achane plus Jalen Waddle. A lot of these blocks where it was like, if I don't think it's going to be a high scoring week, where do I know that points are going to go? So ended up being solid in that regard, just in terms of like, that was enough last week, right? So nothing huge, nothing spectacular, but good feel for last week. Good week for the OWS fam and ready to roll into this one, which is a very, very different week where it was kind of just digging deeper and deeper into blocks last night and trying to find, like last week, I was so high confidence on a handful of spots and so low confidence elsewhere. This week, there's a lot of high confidence in terms of directional stuff, but then low confidence in terms of the individual pieces. And then if we sort of just pair things up in a lot of these spots, we really lower our ceiling on a week where we might need that ceiling. So totally different week than last week. But yeah, looking forward to diving into it here.
Yeah, let's go ahead and we can pull up kind of the overview of the slate here to start thinking about this from a high level and looking at some of the games that we might be interested in here. Let me tab this over on Fantasy Life to the over-under. We, of course, get the Colts on the road against the Steelers. That has a total over 50.5. Our other totals over 50 is this Bears-Bengals game, total of 51. And then, of course, the game of the week here in that late window, Kansas City Chiefs, Buffalo Bills over under a 52.5. Are those three games a cut above the rest for you as well? Or do you see some other ones that you would replace those top three with?
Yeah, well, I got to be honest with you, Pete. I stats, but I know that you said the Chiefs and Bills game. What were the other two you threw out there?
Oh yeah, I was just flagging the 3 games with a total over 50. So Colts, Steelers, Bengals, Bears, and Chiefs, Bills.
Okay, yeah, and we have close spreads in those ones, right? So those are the ones that definitely stand out the most. I think that this 49ers Giants game has a sneaky shot to be a contender in that group, but you look at the Steelers is sort of a weird one, right? Like, would we be totally surprised if this is one of those weird Mike Tomlin games where just somehow one spot in the season he figures out a way to slow down this tremendous offense, right? Like, so there is like a little bit of downside there. I think the people aren't factoring in, but generally speaking, we've seen how bad this Pittsburgh defense has been. We've seen how good the Colts offense has been. And we know that the Steelers offense is generally going to keep things close in any game, right? And Arthur Smith offense and Aaron Rodgers offense are going to be competitive. And so that game is pretty high confidence. Bills and Chiefs, we have a game, two good defense, especially on the Chiefs side. But we know that they're going to ask both these quarterbacks to put on the Superman capes pretty early in this one. And then Bears and Bengals, the Bengals haven't been able to stop anyone. The Bears have only been able to stop themselves, right? And so if they're able to pull things together this week, certainly a ton of upside in that spot. And so, yeah, to me, I kind of think that Bears and Bengals, when we take pricing into account, that's the spot, followed by Colts and Steelers, followed by Chiefs and Bills. But I wouldn't argue too heavily against anybody who wanted to rearrange those in any order either.
Yeah, you mentioned the Niners and Giants. That's kind of an interesting game from a quarterback perspective, just because we still haven't gotten really any good concrete updates on Brock Purdy. Sounds like we're going to get another week of Mac Jones. And then you have Jackson Dart, of course, here stepping in without Cam Scatterbo and kind of a depleted weaponry there. Do you have any thoughts on the quarterbacks in that game?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think Purdy's going to play just because they have kind of said that they want to wait till he's 100%. If he hasn't practiced in full, that leads me to believe they're going to have Mac Jones out there again. So I've been operating under that supposition. I do think that if we get Purdy, he's a better play than Mac Jones just because he can do a little bit more, make a little bit more happen with his legs, with his scrambling, with his out of structure stuff. And so Purdy at his price tag, I think, would be tremendous in this spot. Yeah, it's a weird one because you look at it, the 49ers have an implied total over 25, but they only have a couple games this year over 21 points scored. They haven't been this juggernaut of an offense this year. And obviously they're a little bit healthier now with Kittle. That makes a big difference in their run game and their pass game. But then Giants are kind of like this defense that people have been able to walk all over sometimes, but we know that they have this great front four, and every once in a while they're able to throw a game out there. So I think that this game has a really broad range of outcomes. But I think that both quarterbacks are viable here, where Mac Jones, we've seen him put up 25, we've seen him put up 22. He can definitely do that in this spot. I'm going to throw something out there. We're going to get sort of off the beaten path early. I was thinking about this last night. Juwan Jennings, right? Like, he's 4,300. People are looking at him this week. It's like, oh man, he's so underpriced. You know who's run the same number of routes as him over the last 3 weeks? Kendrick Bourne. And people have completely forgotten about him, right? He's only 700 more than Juwan Jennings. And so it feels high probability that this is a great spot for Christian McCaffrey to have, another 24 to 30 point game, and he has that upside above that. It feels high probability that one of these pass catchers is going to put up 14 points at minimum with a good shot at like 20 to 25. And that's Juwan Jennings, that's George Kittle, but it's also Kendrick Bourne. And so, I think that's an interesting game to look at just from a standpoint of where we can be a little bit different while still targeting the same high probability things other people are targeting. And then, Jackson Dart's a weird one because there's no weapons. There's no reason to think that this offense should continue to do decently. A lot of it is just him taking things on his shoulders, doing things out of structure. And so you do wonder how sustainable that is, how long the magic can last. But against this 49ers defense, it's certainly possible, right? They're so banged up. They have no pass rush. And so, I think this is a very interesting game where if we had a thinner week, this would be a game that would really stand out to me because it'd be like, hey, people aren't going to look at this or feel as comfortable with this as they should. But we have these other 3 games where it's like pretty high probability. Like, we've seen these Bengals games over and over again, right? And even if somehow that doesn't work out, we've seen this Colts offense over and over again. And we know what happens in Chiefs and Bills games. And so it's going to be hard for that game to really ascend the way that you would need it to. But I do think we need to keep it on our radar this week.
Yeah. Is it from the Jackson Dart perspective, and we talk about this a lot with the rushing quarterbacks, is it just tough for you to figure out how to play that as a block as far as just lack of confidence in Wan'Dale Robinson, Theo Johnson? Obviously, we'll get to Tyrone Tracy, who's going to be fairly popular, but is it just kind of that overall offense doesn't jump out to you?
Yeah, that's a big part of it is turning the math in our favor. And we often talk about that, right? You run the Sims, and what's going to pop? It's going to be a quarterback with 2 or 3 pass catchers, and ideally a spot where you know that if the quarterback is succeeding, those pass catchers are succeeding because you're getting 3 spots right with 1 bet. And that makes such a big difference in the math. And so these quarterbacks, and you can win with these one-off quarterbacks who don't have a stacking partner, don't have a clear stacking partner, but it's just much tougher to turn the math in your favor on those guys. And so, yeah, you look at Wan'Dale Robinson, it's like we're real at, projections like him. So he tends to draw some ownership, and you're like, you're really needing a lot to break his way for him to post a tournament winning score given the way that he's used. But then Darius Slayton, it's not a great matchup on the outside against the 49ers. If you want to go down to Darius Slayton, Theo Johnson, it's like, do we really get the ceiling there? And so, then it becomes a thing of, are you just betting on Jackson Dart doing things out of structure, running around, throwing his head at the wall? He doesn't have his running mate in Cam Scatterbo. I don't know how much of a difference that makes. But I was talking the first week that these guys stepped into the lineup. I kept talking about we should see a different energy around the Giants this week. And it was overwhelmingly different energy just inserting those two guys. And so I do wonder, just taking Scatterbo out, that might make a little bit of a difference too, just from a human standpoint, right? You don't have Scatterbo out there. I mean, the Eagles fans gave him a round of applause, like as he's getting carted up. Like, people like Cam Scatterbo. His ankle was pointing the wrong way, and he reached up for somebody to help him up off the ground. Like, you can't help but root for this guy. And so, yeah, I do think that there's maybe something different in this offense without him out there. Certainly Tyrone Tracy doesn't bring the same juice that Scatterbo does.
Yeah. Let's bounce back up to the high end. Of course, the two top quarterbacks on the slate by pricing, probably by raw ceiling, and in the same matchup against each other, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. I know we haven't really been paying up for quarterback in too many spots this year. Is this an exception for you, or are you not enthused about the price tags and matchup?
Yeah, well, so Josh Allen, I laid this out in the journal earlier this week, but since that 13 seconds game, which was, I think he put up like over 40 DraftKings points in that game, and he's certainly capable of that. But it's generally been, he has 2 games of like around 30. It's like 7 or 8 games against the Chiefs since then. He has 2 games around 30, and the rest have been like 23 to 25 DraftKings points. So you just think about the way that this offense is run with the weapons that they have, the way that the Chiefs defense is run. It's hard for Josh Allen to put up a had-to-have-it score, right? One of those 35 to 40 type scores, which is what we're really looking for at his price tag. I think it's a little bit easier for Patrick Mahomes to do that, given the weaponry he has and given the matchup they have against the Bills defense, right? Because what makes the Bills defense good is all these creative pass defense looks that Sean McDermott throws. It's a lot of zone, but it's really creative zone that kind of tries to throw the quarterback off, makes him wait a half second longer to kind of figure things out. But they can't stop the run. So then if they have to dedicate extra bodies to stopping the run, they can't do as much in the pass defense. And so I do like Mahomes more in this spot as like a higher confidence bet. It doesn't mean he has a higher ceiling. It just means, he's the guy who's going to hit more often. But then on top of that, we have really tight pricing this week. And so, I don't think that you have to go up to these guys, but I do think that these guys have to be sort of kept in the loop of consideration. The Sims don't like them this week, at least the stuff that I've been running, because it's like, basically it's looking at it, it's like there's better ways to build rosters than going up at the high price tags. But, sometimes one of the things that I've enjoyed about running Sims this year is it trains you in what to look for in building rosters. But if you can kind of project a slate differently than the projections are projecting them, you can still come to a different conclusion on what's the highest ROI rosters, right? So I've had weeks where I went against the Sims and had success this season because it's still understanding here's how I should be building these particular rosters, even though I'm seeing the slate a little bit differently. So I think that these guys remain pretty sharp on this slate, but they're certainly not, to me, like had to go there types of guys. If we play out the slate 100 times, more often than not, this is not the way to build. But it is within the range of outcomes that we get those monster games coming out of this spot. We have to be thinking about that this week.
Yeah. And, going back to the stacking thing, it is much easier to stack Mahomes than it is 100%. The Josh Allen weaponry. Even seeing Khalil Shakur play pretty well, but his routes were still, I think, mid 60% route participation, not a full-time player. Dalton Kincaid, not a full-time player. It's like outside of Josh Allen and James Cook, no one is, hogging the work in that offense. Let's talk about that other game with a total over 50, the Caleb Williams, Joe Flacco. We do have to wait on some of that news there. I feel like Caleb Williams, right? Every week he looks so poor, and then these matchups keep coming up for him on a tee, and it's like, it's the Bengals. They've been so bad. So do you see pass for Caleb succeeding in this one? Yeah, well, I think there should be probably more context than we typically give here in terms of like every type of tournament is different, right? What we're looking for is different. So I'm typically talking through the lens of what are the sharpest plays on the slate. And that doesn't necessarily mean the sharpest projection system plays on the slate, but what are the sharpest plays on the slate through the lens through which I look at games, because I'm mostly playing single entry 3 max and sort of mid-sized to small field contests. And my strategy there is
just where is the highest probability stuff that I can bet on? And that doesn't necessarily mean individual players, but at least directionally, right? And so when we look at directional high probability stuff, like directionally, it's high probability that Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes will be asked to put on the Superman cape early in that game. Now, how does that play out? That's the question mark, but at least we know that component, right? So we look at this game, directionally, we know that the Bengals are going to say, let's throw the ball a ton. So there's a lot of confidence there. On the Bears side, we don't have a ton of confidence. We have that directional confidence that points are going to be scored. But since they came out of the bye, they have become more of a run-first team. And then with DeAndre Swift dealing with these lower body injuries, that's another one of these injury pieces we're actually waiting on, right? He didn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. If we get Kyle Monangai, well, there's a slam dunk play right there. There's a high confidence play right there. But we've kind of got this split backfield where neither guy is seeing enough work to feel high confidence. But then they're taking away enough work from Caleb Williams and this passing attack that it's like, I don't feel high confidence that Caleb Williams is going to smash just because it's a good matchup. And DJ Turner's been one of the kind of surprises of the NFL this year at cornerback. The Bengals have been decent against wide receivers, as bad as they've been on defense. And so, I think that this is one of these spots where Caleb Williams is very much in the mix, but I see him as a very broad range of outcomes type of guy. And a lot of it's just down to how the Bears are going to try to win this week, in that they can run against the Bengals, and they've been running the ball and running their offense through the ground game, which is very much like a Ben Johnson staple from those Lions years. And so we know the first 4 weeks of the season, teams are collecting information, figuring out who they are, what they do well. So it's very normal to come out of a week 5 bye and then be like, hey, we're not going to throw the ball as much here, right? And so even last week where Caleb Williams had these 38 pass attempts, a lot of those were trailing game script deeper into the game when they're getting the ball those last couple drives and just throwing. And so, a lot of question marks around just how he's going to be used in this spot. And that's my big concern here. He's in the mix for me, but he's kind of lower down below Joe Flacco, right? Because for me, Flacco, we know they're going to ask him to throw a lot, and I like that quite a bit more.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those things where you have to hit a 2-leg parlay where it's like you need Caleb Williams to be good, and then you also need to know where the ball is going. And he has been a guy who's spread things out. Obviously, Rome is probably the highest conviction play, but you see a bunch of these other guys, a split tight end room. He's just also a little trickier to stack. Let me ask you about another value option that I think people are going to gravitate to. We did get the news this morning, Travis Hunter going on IR right after a pretty good game heading into the bye. So it is just going to be Brian Thomas Jr. and then, the usual cast of characters there, Parker Washington, etc. But thoughts about Trevor Lawrence on the road at 5,400 against the Raiders?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lawrence is very live this week. My first practice build of the week was a Trevor Lawrence roster. I got this game listed as the all disappointment bowl. Like, it's hard to remember the optimism around the Raiders heading into the season, where it was like, man, the Raiders could really make some noise this year. And yeah, it's a tough AFC West. They're not going to make the playoffs out of that division, but they could be a 7-9 team. And like, they had the pieces, right? Got the coaching staff. They've got the weapons on offense, and it's just been broken. And so both teams coming out of the bye, we know the issues Trevor Lawrence has had. Both teams coming out of the bye, there is that seed in my mind that's like, what if both teams figured things out? But then you have to zoom out and say, well, that's pretty low probability that both teams would figure things out given how bad things have been. Obviously, the Jags, it's not been as much about their system and their entire offense as it's just been about Trevor Lawrence. So that's easier for them to figure out. Trevor Lawrence, I think on this week, where he's not been great through the air, and then sometimes he just tries to compensate for that by running a little bit, right? And so we saw it against the Chiefs in a competitive game, which is where you're like there to see something like that. But even going back to last year, he had some of these bigger games where a lot of it was through his legs. And so whether it's him finally figuring things out through the air, he and Brian Thomas Jr., or whether it's him kind of taking over and just deciding to do some things on the ground, I do think this is a very interesting spot. It's dented a little bit by the high confidence that we can have in those top 3 game environments, and the fact that we also have the 49ers and Giants, and this is a week with plenty of game environments. And then on top of that, you've got the Chargers and the Rams and these other teams with these, that are expected to win handily. Obviously, that's probably not coming through the passing attack, but we still have to account for those spots, right? Like we could have like a 4 touchdown game from Jared Goff, from Matt Stafford, from Justin Herbert. And so it's kind of harder for Trevor Lawrence to ascend on this week. But to me, he definitely is a guy that like he's there in my mind. Like I'm thinking about him more than I'm thinking about Stafford, more than I'm thinking about Herbert and Goff. I'm not totally sure on that one yet, but he's kind of up there in that second tier of quarterback options for me this week.
Yeah, I was going to just head to a couple of those others that you mentioned, and I guess we can lump those guys in. Maybe 2 that you didn't mention that also have pretty big team totals would be the Colts and Daniel Jones. And then I think you probably toss Jordan Love in there as well. Any thoughts on those guys?
I mean, I think this is going to be a different Colts game than we've had this year because it's unusual to see Aaron Rodgers get blown out in the game, right? We take out Jets are a dysfunctional organization, but we just know that Rodgers is going to be able to figure out a way to keep a game close. And so if we think that the Colts are able to continue doing what they've been doing and what other teams have been doing against the Steelers defense, I think the Colts are scoring a lot of points here. And then I think this is a competitive game. So Lord Reeves at Sharp Football Analysis, he's been on top of this, like Daniel Jones first half versus second half. Like first half, he's QB1, I think, in the NFL this year. And second half, he's like QB20 or something in that range. Like they just don't throw the ball in the second half. Yeah. They don't have to. So this is a competitive game. I think we have a very different Daniel Jones Colts pass catcher setup than we've had in other weeks. And this, I kind of keep coming back to this as it's Friday. I don't know for sure, but this is like one of my 1 or 2 or 3 favorite quarterback spots on the slate in terms of the confidence that we're going to have in points being scored in this offense and the higher likelihood that this is going to have to come through the air against the Steelers and on the ground. Because again, why is Daniel Jones not smashing when this offense is on this 2007 Patriots, 2013 Broncos type of pace? Well, it's because Jonathan Taylor's got 14 touchdowns and, he keeps getting, 12 rushing touchdowns, I think, right? He's getting all these touchdowns on the ground. But the Steelers are a team that's likelier than most to kind of keep Jonathan Taylor out of the end zone, or at least prevent him from having 3 touchdowns on the ground, which then, if the Colts are still scoring, tilts things over to Daniel Jones in this passing attack. So, yeah, I kind of think this is one of those spots where end of the season, we're flipping through box scores and there's 1 or 2 outlier games on Daniel Jones game logs. And this is one of them, where it's like, oh yeah, it was like these 15, 17, 22, 23 games. And then, oh, here's a 31 point or something like that. So yeah, I think this is a good spot for a game like that from Daniel Jones this week.
I guess you mentioned him briefly. I assume it's kind of a similar problem as far as just a runaway game script. As far as Justin Herbert versus Tennessee, you can throw on him, you can pass on him. The wide receiver room has really been clicking of late, and it's also kind of narrowed out now that we have Gadsden's emergence and then Ladd kind of ascending back to wide receiver 1. Is that a passing game you'd be interested in, or prefer it through the ground?
No, I prefer it through the ground. And again, like we can say it's kind of narrowed out, but we could have said the same thing early in the season when Quentin Johnson was getting all the schemed looks, right? Like I think that this is a team that has now 4 really good weapons through the air, and we might only see 25, 27, 29 pass attempts from Justin Herbert in this spot. So last week, Ladd had 10 targets on only 25 pass attempts from Justin Herbert. But then you go back to the beginning of the season, it was Quentin Johnson getting that type of usage. I don't know that this is necessarily something that has completely shifted, right? What if it had started with Gadsden and Ladd McConkey, and then at this point in the season, it had shifted over to Quentin Johnson? Where would our minds be, right? It would either be like, oh, this offense has shifted over to Quentin Johnson, or we might say, oh, this is just a blip. This is kind of the nature of how things go throughout the season. Sometimes things change. It'll rotate back over to Ladd. And so, yeah, I think that there's a lot of suppositions to make on top of the fact that one of the clearest things we can say here is there's a pretty low probability that we get heavy passing volume from this Chargers passing attack. And so, I like Herbert. To me, very fine play, but on my tightest builds, he's not a guy who's standing out as one of the highest confidence bets that you can make this week.
You also briefly touched on Goff. I'm kind of curious of your thoughts on that game environment, mainly with the added wrinkle of getting JJ McCarthy back, and we've seen such limited action from him. Obviously, you look at the wide receivers in this game, you look at the dome, you look at the Lions team total, and you're like, hey, this has potential for fireworks. I don't think this game is going to garner much interest in DFS this week, though.
Yeah, the only way, and we've seen a small sample size of JJ McCarthy, so we have to be smart enough to acknowledge that and say, maybe JJ McCarthy comes out and just lights it up this week. But also those long shot maybes, most of the time, those don't end up happening, right? And so realistically, what we've seen is probably what we get here, which to me, I have a hard time seeing the Vikings keeping this game close unless they can make it low scoring. And I'll be surprised if they can make it low scoring, right? The Lions have had their way with Brian Flores' defense over the last couple of years. They've scored 30 points 2 times, 31 points 2 times. So interesting notes there. Last year, Jahmyr Gibbs was the way for the Lions to beat this Vikings defense. He put up 35 points with David Montgomery playing, 49 Draftkings points with David Montgomery off the field. But also, when you're talking about this heavy blitz rate from Brian Flores, and Jared Goff has done tremendous against Brian Flores over the last couple of years. And, where does Jared Goff go when he's having to get the ball out quickly? He goes to Amon-Ra St. Brown. So over the last 4 games between these teams, St. Brown has 3 games of 28 plus DraftKings points. So it's harder for me to see Goff being the guy who's part of it. he can do it. We've seen him have these random 4 and 5 touchdown games on 26 pass attempts. And because we've seen it happen enough times, it's a bet that I always want to keep in mind in a spot like this. It's pretty low confidence, but Goff is very much in the mix. But then extending beyond Goff, I do think that this offense, it's decently likely that one of Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown, possibly even both of them, puts up like a 27, 28 plus point game here. And so I think this offense needs to be kept in mind. I don't think Goff has to be kept in mind, but we should be recognizing that Goff can have one of these games. And look at this game against Chicago, right? Where they put up 52 points and they were, continuing to score points deep into the game. This is what we see the Lions do sometimes for these. And that one was that one we were able to pretty much predict, right? Ben Johnson, they're playing against Ben Johnson, and it's like, hey, we want to put our foot on the throat. We talked about it that week. It's like, if the Lions have a lead, they're going to stay aggressive throughout this game. Vikings, a little bit of a different story, right? There's no animosity there. Not there's animosity with Ben Johnson, but it's like, we're going to send a message here, right? They've sent their message to the Vikings already. So I don't know that we necessarily see the Lions go to that mode where they're just in like kill mode and they're going to keep pouring on points deep into the game. But we do have to keep in mind that the Lions sometimes do that, especially against division opponents or other elite conference opponents. And so, a lot to think about in this game where it wouldn't be a shock if Jared Goff emerges as like the quarterback you had to have where nobody's really thinking about him because you can't really predict it. What we can predict is he's going to have under 30 pass attempts, almost certainly. So then it's easy to just say, all right, let's move on from him. But we've seen it enough times from this offense that I do want to at least keep it in mind this week.
I know one of your favorite quarterbacks we're going to explore in more detail when we get to the lineup building portion of the show at the end. I guess just I'll give you one other opportunity if there's any names we haven't hit yet. One I'll just toss in there would be Drake May, just because he's playing so well. Drake May, and then any other off the board plays you like?
Yeah, Drake May kind of goes into that same bucket with the turning the math in your favor discussion. I've got like 1,900 rosters in the Bink machine so far. I was running the Sims last night, and like one of my top 100 rosters, a few of my top 100 rosters were Drake May doubles. It was like Drake May plus Kayshon Boutte plus Hunter Henry, and you're like, what are the chances that not only Drake May hits, but I guess on the right two guys that he's going to hit with, and that was Sims for smaller field single entry, and it was like, no, I'm overriding that in my thoughts, right? To me, Drake May doubles, you pull that out in larger field stuff and hope you land on the right combination. But for smaller field, I think even if Drake May hits, you're probably still winning a tournament through a different avenue just because it's so hard to guess on who those stacking partners are. But I do think even last week we were talking about Drake May as like, he's playing the Browns. It was like, you got to consider him against the Browns because what he's doing is real. The way they match up against this defense is real. I think that he matches up less well against the Falcons than he did against the Browns, primarily because what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is the 49ers and the Dolphins saying, oh, the Falcons have this good defense. They're fast, but they're small. Let's put a bunch of big bodies on the field and just run it down their throats. And I can very much see we've seen Josh McDaniels go to Buffalo and throw the ball, whatever it was, 7 times in an entire game with Mac Jones. This is the type of spot where you can see the Patriots say, hey, let's just run out that game script and go heavy and run the ball all game. So, I think that there's a little bit more downside to Drake May than we've been seeing, but I think he's a guy that you always kind of keep in consideration at this point in the season.
All right. Appreciate everybody hanging out in the chat on this wonderful Halloween afternoon. We are going position by position. We'll hop over to running back here in a second. If you guys are new to the channel, please subscribe. JM and I are here every single Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, walking you guys through these slates. And if you are already subscribed, give us that thumbs up. JM, let's head over to running back. Kind of the norm this year is we have some really strong plays at the top. Let's start right there with kind of the Jonathan Taylor CMC 1-2 punch. Obviously, there's kind of another tier below them, but because Jonathan Taylor is now inching up almost to 10K here, it doesn't seem like his ownership is going to be outrageous and people are going to gravitate to CMC for $1,000 cheaper. Do you have any thoughts on our superstar running backs up here?
Yeah, I think CMC is a better play this week, quite frankly. When we're looking at the matchup, the game environment, we're looking at how these guys are used. There's just more confidence in Christian McCaffrey because of that pass game involvement. And we know that Jonathan Taylor has been supported by these 3 touchdown games, which he has, 3 of them now on the season. And so, again, just saying, I do think points pile up in this game, but I think it's less likely that we have these huge explosive runs from Jonathan Taylor. I think it's less likely that we have the 3 touchdown game from Jonathan Taylor. And so it's one of those weeks where you're going to see the field kind of move off of somebody together and then kind of just be right, which is, we see that sometimes where the field, everybody sort of moves on to a guy on the same week and that guy ends up hitting for the big game. Everybody sort of moves off the guy on the same week and that guy kind of underwhelms. I don't think Jonathan Taylor's putting up a bad game here. I think we're still getting, the 23, the 26, the 27. It's just harder for me to see one of these 35 to 40 point games here. There is strategy edge in saying, if I can find the extra salary and I'm not sacrificing things elsewhere on a roster, let me take that swing because crazy things happen in the NFL. But in terms of just trying to predict what's likely to happen, to me, Jonathan Taylor doesn't fall into the highest confidence bucket this week, whereas CMC absolutely does. So to me, yeah, it is. It's boring because that's kind of, I think, the path that people are generally taking this week is CMC over Jonathan Taylor, but I'm in that bucket this week.
Of that next tier of running backs, I'll toss some names out. Bijan, Gibbs, Jacobs, Kyren, James Cook. I think that would kind of be that secondary tier. Do you have any favorites among those?
Yeah, Gibbs by far. The other guys aren't even in my player pool this week. So
okay.
Bijan, kind of what we were dealing with last week, totally different in the way that it played out. But last week we were trying to assess these running backs against one another. One of the knocks against Bijan was, yeah, it's a great matchup. So we thought it's a great matchup, but we've got him splitting this backfield with Tyler Algier, right? It's not like Jonathan Taylor where last week, I think Jonathan Taylor had all but one running back touch. Maybe he had 100% of the running back touches. You're not getting that with Bijan. And so even when he has his high-end run out, it's harder for him to put up the 35 to 40 pointer. A lot has to break his way. And then the Patriots are so good against the run, good against outside zone runs, which is where he's used the most. Josh Jacobs, we talked about this last week, but with this lower body stuff going on with him, they're giving Emmanuel Wilson a lot of run here. And then even though the Panthers got smashed by James Cook last week, it's been a really good run defense throughout the season. And then James Cook taking on Kansas City. That's probably the one that I'm most interested in of this group. But, of these guys that I'm saying, no, not for me. Just because if you're betting on that game environment or saying, where do the touchdowns come? Or could he break off some big plays? But again, it's pretty low probability that he puts up a monster game against this Kansas City defense. And then Kyren Williams, to me, just based on workload, he should be priced at like 6,100, right? And so I'm fine not paying the 6,800 and happy if other people want to chase that. It's going to be difficult for him to put up one of these 30-plus point games, which is what you're kind of looking for from him. Gibbs, like I said, he's taken over this backfield a little bit. He's been the way for the Lions to beat this Vikings defense. It's kind of aggressive, right? And puts a lot of guys in the box. In the last couple of years, they've been a good run defense, not so much this year, but it's not because of their personnel so much as the way that they play defense, where they're close to the line of scrimmage, they're aggressive, but that opens things up for a player like Jahmyr Gibbs to hit for some big plays. And so Gibbs is not a guy that I'm going out of my way and saying, I've got to find the salary to get to him. I'll even say most of my hand builds this week, once I've put Gibbs on, I've been like, I feel like there's probably better ways to build, has been where my thought has gone. And yet we've got to recognize that he could easily put up one of these 32, 35 point games here. So I think that Gibbs, we look through 2 games this year over 20 Draftkings points, whereas CMC has all but one game, and that game was against Houston of 22.7 or more. So CMC's higher confidence in this price range than Gibbs, but I could see Gibbs putting up the top game of these running backs this week.
All right, we're going to bounce around here to a news-related topic. The chat flagged this a few minutes ago, and I did see it confirmed here. No Ramondre Stevenson this week for the Patriots. Kind of interesting because they're at home, 25-point team total. You can certainly run on the Falcons. I think even a little easier to run on them than throw. What is this backfield going to look like? And is this a chance to get in on Trevion Henderson for cheap?
Yeah, I was actually working through this last night because I started thinking, okay, they added Dearness Johnson to from the practice squad or from the Cardinals practice squad. There's been, reports from Mike Reese that they're looking to trade for a running back. And it was like, this seems to be a bigger issue for Ramondre than they're letting on. And it dropped in the journal last night. It was like, this kind of seems like pretty much a foregone conclusion that we're not going to have Ramondre and the Patriots are just, competitive advantage waiting to let this news get out there. And so, yeah, I don't think that Terrell Jennings is a guy. I don't think they dislike Trevion Henderson, right? I think that they really like Ramondre Stevenson, and they've been bringing Trevion Henderson along slowly. But I don't think that there are things about, especially listening to Josh McDaniels talk, listening to Mike Vrabel talk, I don't think that they're like, oh, we regret taking this Trevion Henderson pick, and he's not fitting in with this team or with this offense. He's not putting in the work. That doesn't seem to be the vibe. It seems to be just more, we like Ramondre, right? He's our lead back, and we're bringing Trevion along slowly. So I don't think there's a high risk of Patriots shenanigans, Terrell Jennings getting all the touches. I think that we see Trevion Henderson step into this 75% role that Ramondre has had. And what does that mean, right? Because Ramondre hasn't been hitting. And it's kind of like this Tyler Shuck taking over for Spencer Rattler thing. It's like Spencer Rattler resoundingly won that job in training camp, and they've been starting him all year. And now Tyler Shuck is starting. We can assume that Tyler Shuck is not as good in this role as Spencer Rattler was, right? So the Patriots have continued to give Ramondre these touches, and he hasn't been performing well. So is the ceiling on TreVeyon Henderson higher than it is on Ramondre Stevenson? I don't think it necessarily is. I think that because we have this fresh injury news coming in later in the week than the Isaiah Pacheco injury news, for example, then I think that we're going to see TreVeyon Henderson be higher owned than Kareem Hunt. I think Kareem Hunt on paper is a stronger play for 200 less in salary, but I think TreVeyon Henderson is very much in the mix. So last night when I was thinking through this, I moved TreVeyon Henderson. I had Patriots running backs in tier 2 of my player grid, tier 2, like bonus running backs. And then I moved him up to tier 1, which is kind of guys I'm considering on my tighter builds. He's still listed in tier 1 right now, but I haven't done my write-up yet. And I was kind of like, am I moving him back down to tier 2? So that's where I'm at with TreVeyon Henderson. I think he's very much a guy that we can be considering on tighter builds. I'm not 100% there yet on pulling the trigger myself. The upside is there. That's what's scary, right? We've seen teams attack Atlanta on the ground. The Patriots are one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the NFL in heavier personnel, not as high of a rate as the 49ers, but they're up there, and they could easily say, hey, let's throw extra bodies on the field and just take on this lighter Atlanta defense and run the ball. And so, something like a 25 carry game isn't outside the realm of possibilities. And then he's a smash play. And even if he's getting like the 16, 17 touches, he has a shot at putting up a big game. And his bad game's probably going to be like 11, 12, 13, 14 points. So not killing you at his price tag. So I think he's a sharp play. I still am gravitating toward Kareem Hunt over him right now, but very much in the mix.
Question for you on this, because you mentioned we were talking about Mahomes and Allen and how because it is a little bit of a tighter slate that you might be needing to find salary savings if you are playing those guys. In that instance, if you were playing an Allen or Mahomes, would you rather go to like a one-off TreVeyon Henderson or play Kareem Hunt correlated as part of the game environment? I guess maybe a little trickier with Mahomes, knowing he's probably stealing touchdowns away from Mahomes. How would you think about that?
Yeah, no, I would lean toward the Kareem Hunt in that instance, because you're basically saying, I hope there's 5 touchdowns from the Chiefs in this game. And if that ends up being the case, then Kareem Hunt is involved in that. Patrick Mahomes is involved in that. You're just soaking up the touchdowns from the game environment in that spot. So yeah, I actually really like that. It's a way to lower that price tag on Patrick Mahomes a little bit. Throw Rashee Rice in there, or just leave him off and say, yeah, Rashee Rice is going to have, probably the best game of the wideouts, but he's 7,600, and maybe it's not a big enough game that I'm needing to pay up for that price tag, and I'm just getting the touchdowns from Kareem Hunt. But I don't think there's a wrong answer there. But yeah, in terms of what the math would say is better, I think just throwing Kareem Hunt in there is better because you're concentrating that singular bet on that game environment taking off.
Let's hit on 2 of the other value plays that I think are going to be fairly popular this week in the low 5Ks. You got Jaylen Warren, 5,500 at home versus Indy, has had a solid role. And then Tyrone Tracy stepping into the lead back role with no Cam Scatterbo, and also a pretty nice matchup with how banged up the Niners are. Thoughts on Tracy and Warren?
Yeah, I don't see it on those guys. They won't be in my player pool. And sometimes we get so hung up on price tag. But like Kimani Vidal is 6,300, right? DeAndre Swift is 6,100. How much are we saving on these guys? So I would gravitate toward Jaylen Warren over Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy averaged 11, I think it was 11.1 Draftkings points per game last year. He was in this price tag all year last year, and nobody was playing him. And this is one of those spots where we get the injury situation, and people just like their minds just click over to, hey, who's the backup running back? Who's the guy taking over the lead role? We're not getting a discount on Tyrone Tracy. This is where he's appropriately priced as a guy that nobody was playing last year. So yeah, we've got Jackson Dart under center now, but you watch that game and the switch from Scatterbo over to Tyrone Tracy, or you watch that game after watching 3 or 4 other games, and it looks like Tyrone Tracy is running through cement. It's like, well, he's at a different speed than some of these other running backs that we're considering. And so can he hit? Yes. Is he a guy that I'm wanting to play at ownership? No. And when I see something like that, I just generally chalk it up as edge and say over time, it's an advantage to me that 20% of the field might go to these guys. And so, like I said, I like Jaylen Warren more than Tyrone Tracy. I could see him hitting, but you're still stretching things of like a lot needs to fall in place for him to have one of these tournament winning types of games. And so, to me, both those guys are a no for me this week.
I guess let's circle back real quick to a couple of those mid sixes. Guys, you mentioned Kamani Vidal, and I know when we talked about Herbert preferring the running game there, I guess we kind of hit on Swift a little bit, maybe worth touching on Etienne and Genty in that game as well. Any of those other names stand out to you?
Yeah, no on Genty, just because, systematic issues with that offense. But Etienne keeps kind of popping to me as like, he's not as good of a play as these other guys, but he could ascend above them in scoring because this is such a well-schemed rushing attack. They're coming out of the bye. So same as we saw the Bears say, hey, let's focus a little bit more on the run game coming out of the bye. We could see something like that. DeAndre Swift, it's really just a question of, does he get enough touches? Like, I think that this backfield is going to put up 32 to 36 DraftKings points. It's just a question of do enough of those points concentrate on DeAndre Swift, but definitely like DeAndre Swift here. And then Kamani Vidal, to me, he should be priced at like 6,800, 7K in a matchup against Tennessee where he's got the backfield to himself. We looked through the game logs and Jarrett Patterson had all these touches last week, but that was toward the tail end of this easy victory. And so, looks like no Hassan Haskins again this week. And Kamani Vidal, this is his backfield, right? And so I'm expecting 20 plus touches against Tennessee with touchdown opportunities. And I just think he's a really sharp way to go this week. And out of these guys, he's top of the pile. DeAndre Swift next. And then after that, I'm dropping down. Once we get below Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm kind of looking at those two guys. And then I'm dropping down really below 5K after that.
Yeah, I think we've hit on anyone who's kind of remotely relevant or a value, and we can kind of sort through our favorites from the ones identified when we get to the lineup building portion. But let's get ready to head over to wide receiver here. Also need to mention, as usual, we need to get you guys over at 1 week season. You can get that 40% off with promo code Pete40 on any of those rest of season DFS Inner Circle subs. If you ever want to just check out a weekly pass, poke around, see if you like the goods, you can use promo code Pete for 20% off there. Any other promos people should be aware of on 1 week season?
Yeah, so the Bink machine, our optimizer, is $49 for the rest of the season. So if you play playoffs, that's $350 a week. And if you use the promo code Pete, that takes another 20% off. So you're paying less than $40 for that. And I just want to shout out, I'm a single entry 3-max player. I've done some MME over the last few years, but I use the Bink machine for single entry 3-max. It's tremendously valuable. Like I said, I've got 1,900 rosters already built this week just to see what the projections are spitting out, see what rosters look like, to be able to shop through things and get, pick up ideas and see different things that you could potentially think about. And so, we kind of a few times this year drop the price in the Bink machine just because we do think that for single entry 3-max players it's a tremendous tool, and we want to give people a chance to get in there and use it and have that opportunity to get experience using it. So we've got that going on just this week, 1 week only. It's $59 or $49 plus you can take the 20% off with promo code Pete.
There you go. So any of the DFS subs, Pete40 for the 40% off. For the Bink machine special, you can double dip, $49 special plus an additional 20% off with promo code Pete. Let's head over to the wide receiver position. God bless America. We get Puka Nacua back on the slate. We have Jamar Chase. We have Amon-Ra in that game as well. As far as at the high end, all of these guys priced very similarly in those low 8s. Who is your favorite of that trio?
Favorite of that trio is Jamar Chase because, again, just directional certainty. We know they're going to throw the ball. We know they're going to throw it to him a ton. Look at this. He has no plays over 20 yards in spite of 54 targets across these 3 games. He has only 2 touchdowns, right? And yet he's put up 25, he's put up 42, he's put up 21. And so this is one of these, or 41, 21. This is one of those spots where we can look at it and say, oh, yeah, well, the ceiling's not that high because he's not hitting these big plays. Or we could look at it and say, we know that Jamar Chase could take a short pass and go 60, 70 yards. We know that if there's a little bit more time, which there could be on some dropbacks this week, then Joe Flacco is willing to throw the ball downfield. So we can kind of look at him in this CMC category where he's so central to the offense and the floor is so high because of the way that he's being used, just these kind of short handoffs, right? These 5-6 yard passes, get the ball in his hands and keep marching down the field. But we also know that the ceiling is higher than what he's shown so far, right? We've got this 41.1 pointer because he had so many targets, no explosive plays in that game, only 1 touchdown. We know that Jamar Chase is capable of a 2 or 3 touchdown game. We know he's capable of explosive plays. And so Jamar Chase stands out to me the most from this pile. Probably next would be, from a floor standpoint, Puka, because again, we know what his usage is going to look like. But when we talk about game environment and what the Rams might do in this spot, From a ceiling perspective, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown next to me. So again, it's like 28, 30, and 31 in 3 of his last 4 games against Minnesota. And I think Puka will be kind of hard-pressed to go up to 30 points this week. And maybe that sounds like a strong statement until you look through his game logs and you realize he's gone over 27.6 only once this year, right? I mean, it's like the reason we've liked him is because he is wide receiver CMC this season. But is he needed for more than that in this game against the Saints? We know he's not used a lot in the red zone as well. And so kind of harder for him to have that smash game in a game environment that we don't think will be particularly competitive. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, if we're just talking about trying to win a tournament, is next for me. And then probably Rashee Rice after that. Justin Jefferson, I've got to see it from JJ McCarthy before I want to buy in. And if I lose because JJ puts up like a 40-pointer against Detroit with JJ McCarthy, like that's one of those that I'll eat that. I'm fine with that because over time, I got to make these decisions that are kind of the highest probability bets and stack those over and over again. That's how I'm going to make my money over time.
Let's head to some of the other kind of value options. You briefly touched on Jauan Jennings. Sound like you were kind of skeptical on him just because, and I'm skeptical on him too. He says he's playing through 5, broken ribs, really haven't seen the form we saw last year. I guess the other kind of big news thing to talk about is the Travis Hunter. You mentioned liking Lawrence. Now all of a sudden you have Brian Thomas Jr. with really no, firm competition for targets at 6,200. Any value plays stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound like I have trepidation on Jauan Jennings so much as it's just this recognition that he's going to be popular, and I think he and Kendrick Bourne are pretty equal plays. You throw him into the bucket. Who comes out on top more often? I think it's a toss-up, honestly. And so, at only 700 more and dramatically lower ownership, I think that Bourne has to be kept in the mix. But early in the week, I was heavy on like Jauan Jennings on my builds. It was just last night that it was like, wait a second. Isn't Kendrick Bourne still there? Isn't he still running as many routes as Jauan Jennings? Isn't he as involved? Don't they have the same ADOT as one another? And so, and then, he's got this connection with Mac Jones that, we've seen go back to those Patriots days. And so, the Brian Thomas Jr. one, people got way out of whack in their thinking with Travis Hunter's big game down the stretch in a blowout loss. And, he put up whatever over 100 yards, but it was like he had nothing going until those last couple drives and they just tossed up a couple of balls to him. And then the narrative around him heading into this week was like Travis Hunter is going to have a bigger role on offense and all that. So I don't think that him being out materially changes things for Brian Thomas Jr. It's not like the reason BTJ has been playing poorly has been because Travis Hunter is soaking up all this work, right? Parker Washington has a couple of 10 target games this season. They're going to throw the ball to other guys. We've been on this since the start of the season. Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. have never clicked. BTJ's had one big game in his career with Trevor Lawrence. And then, he hasn't really been seeming to sell out over the middle of the field or giving his edge. Maybe Trevor Lawrence throws too many hospital balls, whatever it is. So yeah, I think that the question marks are very real on Brian Thomas Jr., but we know that the ceiling is there, right? So he's a guy that before the Travis Hunter news, now after the Travis Hunter news, he's just been this guy of like, I want to keep him in mind. I don't like the play, but I'm aware that it can hit is sort of how I look at Brian Thomas Jr. this week. And really it's interesting because similar to running back, we talk about these high priced guys. There's a lot of guys we can skip over until we get down, right? Like, I'm not that interested in Drake London against Christian Gonzalez, assuming he comes back this week. I'm not that interested in Nico against Denver, even with Pat Surtain out. Roma Dunze, I'm only playing him in bets on that game environment. Brian Thomas Jr. has all the question marks. We already talked about Ladd McConkey and question marks on volume there. And so, we do kind of get down to this 5K range pretty quickly. And, down to the Bournes and Jennings down here as well. And we've seen this recently, some weeks where there's just no monster scores at wide receiver outside of the high-priced guys. This could be another week like that this week.
All right, then I guess I know you like the guys at the top. You like Chase. Who else do you like? Because it doesn't sound like you like too many of those other guys.
No, I really don't. I think that the two guys who stand out to me the most, and this was the other block that I was thinking about for today's show, is Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf, where both these guys are basically top 25 in most usage metrics, but in terms of like on a per route basis, but they just don't pass the ball enough, either of these teams, right? And so this is one of these spots where if I think that Daniel Jones could have, we looked at the game logs at the end of the year and we're like, oh yeah, that game against Pittsburgh, he put up 32 DraftKings points and the rest of the year it was, 17, 22. like the same thing could happen for Michael Pittman here, where he's heavily involved. The touchdown opportunities are there. The tweets could pile up on a week like this. And then DK Metcalf, same thing, where, also you look through who are just in terms of points per game, who are the most underpriced guys under 6,400. These two guys are at the top of the pile, right? They're near the top of DraftKings points per game for flex players below 6,400. And I expect their volume to be a little bit higher this week. I expect this to be a competitive game environment deeper into the game where both teams are having to throw the ball. And so, I like both of these guys, actually. Two guys who I'm typically not on. And on a week like this, the floor is already high on both these guys, and the ceiling is a little bit higher than it normally is. And then, honestly, Pete, I've struggled with that question. Like, who else do I like at wide receiver? I think it's a pretty thin wide receiver week in general. And so it's another week where you probably can't go wrong, attaching some guys to the game environment bets that you're making and just hoping that things shake out that way, or saying, where can I put up a couple guys together? I haven't found any two wide receiver pairings yet that I really like. Last week I had Goddard and Devontae Smith, two different positions, but two pass catchers together, and Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims that I really liked as a pairing. Obviously, Franklin hit and Mims didn't, but they weren't high owned, right? You just get the points from that block. I'm not seeing as much of that this week, but yeah, I do think that you can kind of get into these game environment bets and just attach wide receivers to that, and then things get thin pretty quickly, and we can just acknowledge that, right? And not try to force anything and realize there's not a lot of certainty at the wide receiver position this week.
You mentioned liking Lawrence. Do you have a preference between like Parker Washington and De'Ami Brown if you're trying to save money and double stack him?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I want to be clear. I don't like Lawrence, right?
Okay.
Like I said, my first practice build had him. He's on the fringe behind like these top quarterbacks. I think he's very viable this week, and he's a guy I continue to keep in mind. But also, most of his bigger games have been, okay, I can't figure things out, I'm going to run the ball, right? And he gets this multi-touchdown game on the ground, or gets a touchdown and like a random 40 rushing yards. So I don't even know that we necessarily get a wide receiver hitting with him. He has seemed to have this preference for Parker Washington this season, right? And so Parker Washington, I think I'd go to him over De'Ami Brown, but nothing's really high confidence there either.
Yep. Are there any other, you generally will have like one or two kind of field stretcher boom bust type plays. Chat talking about Alec Pierce a little bit. I mean, could we even stomach Alec Iomanor with Ridley out again? Any names like that jump out? Maybe Calvin Austin in that same game?
Yeah. Calvin Austin, I've been back and forth on. It's hard to see him getting over like 5 or 6 targets, right? So then it's harder for him to put up one of those big games, because it's not like he's going to put up a 70-yard play. Like Chimere DK could put up a 70-yard play, and that wouldn't be shocking. And so, what's funny? Alec Pierce, definitely, but we're getting kind of expensive there, right? Josh Downs, basically the same points per game as Alec Pierce, but he just sees a lot more volume, and so the floor is higher. But because he can pile up points, and what's interesting about Downs is we've seen him still catch the ball and run after the catch to put up some big plays, right? So he's capable of big plays and a slightly higher floor than Alec Pierce. So both of those guys are in the mix for me. And then, you bring up, like, a lot of times I'm looking at one of these kind of boom bust guys down here for saving salary, but this is sort of a different week where, Josh Downs maybe is as attractive to me as Alec Pierce. And then if we want to get cheap in this range where typically I'm looking for, okay, who might put up 3 but could put up 20? Well, what about Jalen Coker, right? Like a guy who, after Bryce Young came back last year, I think it was 7 games with Bryce Young down the stretch after Bryce Young came back from being benched, and a game of 14, a game of 17, a game of like 22, something like that. And then, a bunch of kind of lower end games. But when we're thinking about these guys who cost 3,600, what we're looking for is the guy who can put up 20 points once, twice a season, typically, right? And we know that usually when they miss, they're going to get 2, 3, 4 points. The Marquez Valdez-Scantling type guys, right? But here we have Jalen Coker, who when he misses, he's going to put up like 5, 6, 7, and he could put up 2, 3, 4 of these 20-point games throughout the season. So I think he's more appropriately priced like 4,400 than 3,600, which still isn't a high confidence play. But if we're just looking to save salary, I do think he's an interesting way to go this week.
Yeah, I wrote up 2 wide receivers in the Fantasy Life newsletter on Wednesday, just trying to help people find, some waiver wire gems. And the 2 were Jalen Coker and Christian Watson, who both kind of like slowly have been coming back to bigger than expected roles. And I mean, we haven't talked a ton about the Packers passing game. Maybe we'll hit on them a little bit more when we get to tight end. But I mean, between like Watson and Dobbs, it didn't sound like you had much interest in the passing game in general, but do you have a preference of those wide receivers?
No, I'm not going to be on that passing attack at all. And they looked awesome last week. But again, you're in a game environment where kind of what I expect the Colts to be this week, where it's stretching deep into the games. They ended up winning that game by 10 points, but they were down at halftime and it was competitive throughout. And you're having to throw the ball deep into that game. And I don't see that being the case this week at home against Carolina. And so, I've liked Carolina this year. I just don't think they match up well with Green Bay. And so, yeah, this passing attack is, especially with how much they spread the ball around, it's kind of hands off for me this week.
All right, let's head over to tight end here, and also want to mention the schedule here. Again, we'll do tight end. We will then build a lineup on Draftkings using one of JM's favorite building blocks. Then we'll have Youdacao swinging by at 2:15 p.m. Eastern to share his thoughts on the slate, and then we'll hand pick some lineups from the Sims that I will be bullying today. And then at 3 p.m. for all my underdog heads, I will be doing the Week 9 preview with John and Nez, sleepers, top plays, all of that good stuff in draft strategy. But Jam, let's talk tight ends here. We have no Trey McBride on this slate, but what we do have is Brock Bowers, who's back on the slate and purportedly healthy. We have Kittle, we have Gadsden, we have Tyler Warren and Tucker Kraft. And then even some other interesting names in that high total game. What are you seeing at the tight end position?
Yeah, this is a week to me where the pay up pathway looks attractive because these guys have ceiling and they're all underpriced relative to other flex plays in the same price range. And so I don't know that this is a double tight end week for me, which I've had a lot of those this season. And a lot of those have been like, hey, here's two guys under 4K that I like for 15 to 20 point pathways. And now we open up a ton of salary. So I don't see it like that this week because, again, you have Kareem Hunt and you have DK Metcalf and you have Michael Pittman and you have Travion Henderson. And so I don't know if these guys are necessarily dramatically better than those plays. But I do think that they're dramatically better than the cheap tight ends, right? Where we could get a 25-pointer or a 30-pointer from one of these guys. So ranking these top 5 guys, Kittle upward, I would go Tyler Warren because of the game environment and the opportunity for touchdowns, how central he is to that offense. So we know that the floor is high, but then the ceiling is high, even though it hasn't shown up yet. We have Tyler Warren. We have Brock Bowers second for me, George Kittle third, Tucker Kraft fourth, and Gadsden fifth. And Kraft and Gadsden is just a volume thing in terms of how these offenses are likely to play. And then George Kittle, it's obviously just that question mark around how much will they use him in the passing game because that's always up in the air for him. So I would say Warren and Bowers are in a different tier for me than these other guys. But I think all of these guys are worth considering, right? Would it shock us if Tucker Kraft only sees 6 targets but puts up a 23-point game on 6 targets? That wouldn't be surprising. We know that George Kittle can put up a monster game on 4 or 5 targets. And so even though we think that the 49ers will have to pass a decent amount in this spot, we know that Kittle's not usually heavily involved when they do that, but he can do it on 4, 5, 6 targets, and he can have those random 8 or 9 target games. And so Gadsden's really the only guy that's not really in consideration for me because, again, they have so many weapons they can use on offense. And I think he's going to have more big games this year, but there's been this ebb and flow of usage there. And I don't think we're getting a lot of passing volume in this spot. So I don't mind taking the risk of missing out on that one. But the other 4 are heavily in consideration for me in that order that I mentioned.
What are you expecting from Bowers? Because there's obviously a lot of Bowers fatigue. People were very high on him heading into the season. He gets hurt. He's playing with the brace, clearly not 100%, goes away for a while, comes back. Because if you told people at the beginning of the season or week 1, Brock Bowers at 5K as the 4th most expensive tight end on the slate, he would have been 40% owned. Everyone would have been like, yeah, give me all of that. Is that what we have this week? Or do you think there is some room for knocking the rust off, etc.?
Well, the excitement around Bowers was projection excitement. It was projecting him taking another step from last year. Where he was being drafted in best ball, even season-long leagues, didn't actually line up with his production from last year. Based on his production from last year, he probably should have been drafted 2 rounds later, but it was, now he's in his second season. He's going to take another step forward. And what we've seen instead is the offense around him take a huge step back. And so I think it's fair to say that Bowers might be appropriately priced here, right? 4 or 5 weeks from now, as we get more information, we could say, yeah, this is about where Bowers still is. Based on last year's usage, he should be, or last year's offense, he should be about 5,800 or 5,900. based on people's expectations for him this year, he should be 6,400, 6,500. So there's just a lot of unknowns here from like, yeah, he's about appropriately priced to, in my mind, he's like 600 to 900 underpriced. And maybe the field and their preseason projections will prove to be correct. And he's like 1,500 underpriced. But, mostly last year, it was 14, 15, 18. It was the Tyler Warren games, 14, 15, 18 points. And then he had 1 or 2 games of 30 plus. Those stick in people's minds, but those weren't the norm. Those weren't what were regularly happening, right? And so, I do think that we expect him realistically to put up 14 to 18 points here. If he gets more than that, that's a bonus. And then, we've got this bad offense that he's attached to. So a lot of question marks there. I don't think he's as underpriced as the field probably thinks, because I think the preseason expectations around him were a little bit off, especially now that we've seen this offense functioning, right? Like not only can we not confidently say he's definitely going to take this huge step forward in year 2, but now the offense around him is way worse than it was last year. But no, I do think that Bowers is very much in the mix, just probably not as underpriced as he looks at this point in time.
I know you like paying up for tight end this week. If you were to try to get cheap, does anyone jump out? Maybe a $3,500 Theo Johnson? Anything else?
Yeah, Theo Johnson's the guy on paper because, again, Bellinger's out this week, right? And then
I believe so. Hasn't been practicing.
Yeah, you've got these other issues, like all the injuries here, and then now no Cam Scannaboo, and we expect them to be passing the ball. No Fred Warner, on the 49ers defense to take away tight ends, and so yeah, I think that Theo Johnson's there. One of the things that I love seeing guys make NFL catches, and what I mean by that is like tight window catches that you're like, man, that's an impressive catch. You don't see that from Theo Johnson. And so then you're like, well, nobody's ever wide open in the NFL. Guys are always covered. So, but he's 3,500, and the target's going to be there. The usage is going to be there. They're going to be throwing the ball this week. And so, yeah, I think he's viable this week. I've thrown him on some Mac Jones practice builds and some Jackson Dart practice builds. I haven't used him as a one-off, and I don't think that I will. But yeah, he's certainly a way to go. And with all these injuries on the Bears pass catcher corps, I think that Cole Kmet's coming back this week. And I think that all these guys outside of Luther Burton with the concussion, I think all these guys are going to play. But if we do get multiple injuries here, I think Colson Loveland does remain interesting as a cheap guy as well.
I know it's such a bummer that Kmet's going to be back, because you started to see Loveland's usage uptick, and the Bengals give up the biggest fantasy boost to opposing tight ends of any team by a country mile. But it's just too tough if he's in a split, route participation.
Yeah, 100%
with Kmet. All right, we are going to build a lineup here in a second. Just want to mention I have, in addition to the shows today, we're going to have 2 other shows this weekend for YouTube members. They are for different tiers. If you're the highest tier, the hand builder in Opto Bro tier, you get access to all of the premium shows. If you were just the best ball value hound, you can catch the After Dark shows on Saturday. This weekend, I'm having Easy from the Deposit Kingdom. A lot of you guys know him. He makes the sheets. Super sharp DFS player. We'll be talking about both Underdog and Draftkings strategy. That's 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. And then Sunday morning, every Sunday, we have the Cram, 10:30 a.m. Eastern. We go through the overnight news, look at the ownership projections, best plays at each position, react to inactives, test some things in the sim, see what's popping, draft some teams, build some pick'ems out, all of that good stuff. Get access to that with your YouTube membership. But it's time to get JM. He can't hide from which wide receivers he likes anymore. He's going to have to put at least 3 of them into this lineup. Let's do it.
Peter's one of the greatest depositors I've ever seen.
Trust the process. Let's go.
I got auto match with Levitan. Bullshit.
I just go the other way. In that 66, I win all the money. All the money.
If I had 150 lineups, I'd win too.
AP, coach spot bullets in your head like KD. Bust it, bitch, go bust it. And I had 10 pints with me in Russia.
Hey everyone.
All right, I accidentally played the extended 27-second intro instead of the 8-second building blocks one, but hopefully everyone...
I was vibing with that and didn't even register that it was not the one that we typically play there.
Well, it's Halloween. I was feeling generous. Wanted to give you this stinger so nice that it had to be 3 times as long. All right, JM, where are we going to start here for this week 9 build?
Yeah, okay, so let's talk high certainty. And uncertainty on whether or not this man is playing, but let's assume he's playing 2 weeks in a row. We've got this situation, but let's assume that Joe Flacco's playing. And we know that Joe Flacco is going to throw the ball a lot because this offense isn't great at running the ball. And that's how they've been trying to win games, is just drop back and throw it, get the ball out quick, get the ball to Jamar Chase. So in 3 games so far, Joe Flacco plus Jamar Chase, this is wild, Pete. Ready? 9 salary. They've kept you on just averaging out the scores across the last 3 weeks, a 189.8 point pace. Just throw these 2 guys in 3 weeks. Now, obviously that came with 1 game of a 250 point pace. The other 2 were 157 and 162. But like I said, we haven't had the big plays yet from Chase. We've only got 2 touchdowns so far from Chase. So there's certainly a higher end run out for us to see. And we like the fact that we think that the Bears can score points here relatively quickly, which could, again, create yet another one of these higher scoring game environments. Like the first of these games was against Green Bay, And so, and really the second game, I talked about this a lot last week, like I felt pretty confident that even with Sauce Gardner out, that the Jets were going to figure out a way to make it a lot harder on the Bengals to do what they wanted to do. And so this is probably the best matchup that they've had behind that Pittsburgh matchup and a game environment where we should see a back and forth. So Flacco plus Jamar Chase, I think, is a really fun way to start a build, and is going to be one of my core ways to start builds on this particular week.
Yeah, and obviously the question, to me, this is kind of simple in the fact, or let me word this way. Is this fairly binary for you? If Joe Flacco's active, you're ready to let this rip, or is there some uncertainty that this shoulder is going to limit him in some fashion and you're not getting the full Joe Flacco you're hoping to put in your lineup?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's certainly risk here. We have to assume that if he's out there, that he can get the ball in these short passes to Jamar Chase and, occasionally throw one downfield, that he's going to keep getting the ball out quickly and just having these downfield handoffs, you could call them, to Jamar Chase. And so, yeah, I mean, there's risk everywhere though. Right. I mean, so, to me, it's game environments is where I'm going to be thinking first and foremost, especially on a week like this, where there are several game environments to like. And then if we say, okay, to me, the top 2 game environments are Chicago, Cincinnati, and Indy and Pittsburgh in terms of how pricing lines up on top of our expectations for scoring. Well, then you take Daniel Jones and you say, well, the touchdowns could come on the ground, and there are more people that Daniel Jones could be throwing to that we could be guessing amongst. Whereas in this one, we have 1 point of uncertainty, and it's Joe Flacco's shoulder. And as long as that's okay, we know that he's throwing heavily to Jamar Chase, and we know that the points are highly likely to pile up in this spot. So we get a lot of things right. It's basically like playing CMC, right? Like, yeah. Is CMC going to keep you on a 225, 250 point pace? Most often he's not. But there's a lot of value to just really high confidence points that you're starting with on a roster, and then gaining additional edge from there. And especially, again, smaller field contests, you're trying to compete against 500 rosters, 800 rosters, 1,000 rosters for first place. Just starting with points at $14K of your salary, there's a lot of edge in that. So, this is a nice way to start a roster. And again, there's some risk there with Flacco, but the amount of certainty that's piled up behind that risk is high enough that I feel pretty good about starting a roster this way.
And my usual question after we get our primary stack in here, do you want to play this as the Bengals getting pushed, or do you feel like this stack can get home even if the Bears aren't putting up a monster score, or maybe they're just not concentrated in a way that makes them unattractive?
Yeah, I think that you have to heavily consider Bears pieces on this build. Again, the risk with the Bears is they're running the ball quite a bit, and then they're kind of splitting up the backfield work. And I went through this in the journal earlier this week, just like backfield scores against Cincinnati. And it's pretty consistently like 34 to 36 DraftKings points, occasionally higher than that. I think like one game lower than that. And so even with the backfield split, you're probably getting 18 points, 19, 20 points from one of these guys. And that guy is probably DeAndre Swift. But we really want that tournament winner if we're, soaking up a spot with one of these guys. But we've seen the Bears 16 points against Baltimore, 26 against New Orleans, 25 against Washington, 25 against Las Vegas. We haven't seen these big games outside of their game against Dallas where they had 31. And the expectation here, the Jets were able to do it against the Bengals, right? The expectation here is the Bears are able to score 30 plus points. And if they are, we're probably getting a really nice game from one of these guys. So to me, Rome Odunze is viable but I actually like the idea of throwing DeAndre Swift onto this stack. That's what I've been doing most often, and then sort of pushed myself to mess around with different ways to play it as well.
JM, I feel like you used to have names, clever names for the blocks.
Yeah. So the name of this one, I didn't used to, I still do. The name of this one is 189.8 is because that's what they've averaged per game this year. So this is the 189.8 block this week.
Okay, I was going to make a joke about calling it Mr. Q or something with this Joe Flacco and DeAndre Swift, the Q tag block here.
There we go. I was going to say I don't get this reference, but I was like,
no.
Pop culture thing. It's a James Bond thing. I don't know.
Did Swift practice today? I haven't seen the report come across. The thing with the Swift stuff is he has been on this similar practice trajectory for a lot of weeks.
Except this week it's been no practice for, if he doesn't play, then you just throw Menungai in here 100% of the time and feel great about it.
For sure. Yeah. Menungai at 4,600 without Swift versus this Bengals defense would open up as like the best play on the slate. All right. We still have a running back slot, the rest of this lineup to fill out, averaging about 5K left here. Definitely a little pricey with Chase. So we'll look for some value. Where do you want to go next?
Yeah, so one of the things I want to mention is just this question of, do we throw T. Higgins onto this stack? The Sims are going to dislike a Flacco plus Jamar Chase without adding T. Higgins on there. And so you just have to ask what the bet is that you're placing, right? Are you placing this bet that this is a shootout and that this is the game environment that you had to have, and therefore T. Higgins has to be on there because we're not just getting the Flacco plus Jamar Chase solid game, but we're getting the elite high-end game, right? The game against Pittsburgh where T. Higgins, you throw it enough times and Higgins is going to get involved as well. So I think for me, I'm fine overriding the Sims and just having this roster without T. Higgins, but also totally fine having some T. Higgins in there. So if I have 15 to 20 rosters this week, single entry 3 max, I'll certainly have, a decent chunk of those will be Flacco rosters and some will have Higgins, some will not. Let's go ahead and build without Higgins on this one to stretch ourselves. Find some wide receivers.
I like it. I mean, I get why, just on the surface, it's like pocket passer, you want to double stack, etc. But like the selling point for Chase is that he's getting such an outsized amount of the targets and he's like basically ignoring, T. Higgins. So I'm like, if we're playing this alpha stack, I kind of want to just play the alpha stack.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And then we're forced to find extra wide receivers, which would be kind of fun on this particular week. Let's go ahead and throw. So there's right here, we want to save some salary, right? But we also want to recognize that I would love to get Kamani Vidal on here if we can. But one of our best ways to save salary is at running back. And so let's go ahead and throw Kareem Hunt onto this one. And then we can decide if we want to use Vidal in that flex spot where he probably is the best guy to use in that price range. And what we're going to find is we're going to probably end up building kind of a mid-tier pricing roster and probably be able to get it to all fit. Because if we then throw in like a secondary bet here on saying Michael Pittman plus DK Metcalf, this other block that I was thinking about throwing in here as our starting point, we're betting on this game environment playing out a particular way, getting these two guys pushing each other. What we're probably going to find is we've got to take Brock Bowers at tight end and then go really cheap at defense, which I don't love. But then we can kind of mess around with, okay, is there something that we want to do differently here? We can overrate our ability to predict defense, but we can also look at the top and say, well, the Chargers are playing Tennessee and the Lions are playing JJ McCarthy and the Rams are playing Tyler Shuck. Like there should be a 12 to 15 point defense this week. And do we really want to miss out on it by going super cheap down here? If we're going cheap, exactly 2,500 with the Raiders is not one that I mind, right? Where we've had just the Jags tripping over themselves this season on offense, more so than other teams stopping them. Max Crosby's still out there. So this is actually a very interesting way to build this. The other way to build it would be to, spend an extra 1,400 at defense, say, and then move off Kamani Vidal right down to Travion Henderson. And so then you can go all the way up to, the Rams defense at 3,900 against Tyler Shuck or the Chargers at 3,800, and then throw Travion Henderson instead of Kamani Vidal on this one, which I think is also totally fine and maybe even slightly more plus EV over time, but it's close between those two ways to run this out. But again, you can kind of see how we're not having to get down to the Jalen Cokers or like the really thin wide receiver plays. And this is the type of roster, it works in kind of contests with 2,000 plus entries, but This is one where I look at these 800 entry tournaments, 1,000 entry tournaments, 500 entry tournaments, and it's just a super sharp roster to throw into one of those.
Any concern? Obviously, I would say the one thing about this lineup is you don't have one of the high-end running backs. I know you mentioned CMC, Gibbs you liked a lot. But do you think with the way the pricing works that having kind of 3, sub elite running backs is viable?
Yeah, I mean, let's take this question and talk about, let's just say like the Pittman and Metcalf pairing and think about the salary that we're spending there, 11.4K. Well, if we're spending that same thing for CMC, well, I should have to spend more, but you're talking about like CMC plus Jalen Coker, right? So what if Coker puts up his 5 to 7 point game and CMC is putting up what we're really rostering him for, which is like the 24 points, the 26 points, hoping, fingers crossed, that he has one of these high-end games. But we're only getting 30 points from that combination, right? So I kind of look at like Flacco plus Jamar Chase is covering what we would typically cover from CMC, where we're not rostering CMC for that 4X salary. We hope he gets there, but we know he's probably not. We're really rostering him for that floor of points that we know we're highly likely to get. Same thing with Flacco and Chase, except that the ceiling is as high on a point per dollar basis as CMC, and we're getting 2 spots covered and more of our salary covered with it. So yeah, I mean, we're missing out on Gibbs, who could put up 30, but I don't think he's going to be super popular, so it doesn't kill us even if he hits that. And he, very easily could put up another sub 20 point game, which he's done in 5 of 7 games this season, or 6 of 8 games, whatever it is, to start the season. So yeah, I think it's a great question, but I'm not super scared of what I'm missing out on there at the high end in terms of why people are rostering those players and what we're doing instead.
All right, let me read this full lineup off for the audio listeners here. We got the Joe Flacco to Jamar Chase stack with the DeAndre Swift bring back. The other running backs, Kamani Vidal and Kareem Hunt. We get that mini correlation with Michael Pittman Jr. and DK Metcalf. Have the money to get in Brock Bowers, and then we play the Raiders defense there. I really like this lineup. How the pieces came together there with maxing out the salary was pretty clean. JM, always a pleasure here, throwing on the mask for your send-off. Any final words before we bring Yuda on here for Bully the Sims?
This might be similar to a couple weeks ago. I might have built this roster or something very similar to this already, but I might have something very similar to this in play this week. But yeah, like that roster, very interesting week, pretty wide open week. And so, yeah, I think have fun building. Don't get too boxed into any one approach, because there are plenty of ways to think about this particular week and more news still to come. So, yeah, have fun out there, and we'll see you on the site. We'll see you at the top of the leaderboards on Sunday.
All right, we'll catch you later, JM. It is time for Bully the Sims with Youdacao. All right, we got Youdacao here for Bully the Sims. I don't know if you heard, Yuda, but I'm a hand builder for Halloween today, which means I'm going to very much be bullying the Sims. My thesis is that Sims have ruined DFS, and we need to get back to the good old days of hand building our roster. So I hope you're ready for this forthcoming.
I like it. You just need the bathroom set up in the back instead.
Oh, yeah, to be on the shitter.
The full costume.
Exactly. How did your week go there in week 8?
It was good. I had a lot of outs just from being on the Jets stuff early. I think last week on the show I was talking up Tyrod. Yeah, thinking it would like sort of boost sort of the way their offense would flow. But I think I also mentioned in passing with like, if it was Fields, that they had greater win equity, and also like losing blowout equity. So that kind of that materialized there, probably ran very good with that as well. And a lot of it was helped by Cincy just slinging it all over and allowing sort of this extended garbage time that turned into a comeback.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate how that ran out, because the Jets call was so good, but then obviously Tyrod is out, which was part of the play. And then even the pass catcher that I'm blanking on, Josh Reynolds was out too. So it was like one of those things. Obviously, you should have played, the optimal would have just been Breece, Isaiah Davis, and Justin Fields. Just play those 3. I guess Mason Taylor was fine.
Breece QB. No, but Breece was better just because of the lower target combination without Reynolds. They don't really have anyone beyond that. It kind of becomes their wide receiver.
Well, that was a great call. It was so funny too, because I had a clip made of your Jets call, and I was like literally about to go post it on social as the news broke that Fields wasn't going to play. And I'm like, I'm not going to post this, but maybe I should have, and just kept everybody with high conviction on the Jets.
Right. Yeah, that was good. Kind of carried the whole week for me.
Yeah. Well, we were talking a little bit before the show. We have some fun topics to talk about. You got some other contrarian angles for us to discuss this week. We will start where we always do, kind of going through some input volatility spots here. Let me get the Run the Sims up here on the screen. Obviously, we have some injury situations unfolding, and we'll do our best to sift through those. I guess one that I would start off right off the rip is how you think this New England backfield will shake out with no Ramondre Stevenson.
It's fairly strict. It's got to be Travion Henderson. No one's really been getting the real sort of. He hasn't been getting, I guess, the first and second down carries, but I don't really see them having an option elsewhere at this point. Just looking at the roster availables, it would just have to be to him. Could be even one of those things where, since he's the only guy sort of suited for that role, but he's also the best pass catcher, he could easily just take on the whole role, like a 80% role. Mm-hmm. Even like it seems like a stretch, but but that's only given how like unwilling they've been to give him the carries. But in this spot, I could actually see him get everything.
So if that's the case, he's 4,900. Obviously, this ownership is probably going to come up a little bit. Run the Sims has him at 15.5% right now. Is that like a smash play?
He's going to be a lot more. He's going to be like once everything updates across the industry, including like a better sense of projections, with the way pricing is this week, he could be like 40.
Yeah.
Right. It's just this Terrell Jennings, who I never even heard of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
he looks like just a body. I guess he has enough size to get the carries, but it's not like he's going to be the first option for carries. And that actually seeing that, I would say it bodes well for Henderson getting like an absolute monster role, just because it doesn't appear that Jennings is much of a pass catcher.
For
and
sure.
Gibson's hurt, right?
Gibson's done for the year. So. Yeah. So I guess the only uncertainty would be they'd still probably give Jennings the goal line carries that Ramondre's been getting.
Sure. There's like a greater. It's like he's kind of losing out on less with May also being a good goal line option. I kind of just think the raw carries plus reception equity now is more than enough at this price, and I'm not even sure he's not going to get goal line carries.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's certainly interesting. I mean, as a prospect, he was very enticing. So it just seems like the Patriots don't trust him, have fallen out of love with him, and yet they're going to have no other option in this game, is what it sounds like your lean is.
Yeah. Unless it's like a Hunter Henry getting a carry. I don't really see it.
That's true. What about, how do you compare him to another similarly priced running back, another running back who is stepping into perhaps a little more opportunity with Pacheco out, $4,700 Kareem Hunt? How do you see the inputs there shaking out?
That one I have less clarity on, really, but it's not like they're going to hand it off to him 16 times. They don't really even like give that type of load between the two running backs normally. So it's more likely in a game like this, just Mahomes making the call, like maybe a few more like bootleg or design scramble. But like he's not really suited to have that big workload anyway. And given that it's a big game, they're probably not willing to trust like a Rashard Smith either. As at least not in like a full on like 50-50 type of role.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wonder if we even see like Eli Mitchell getting 6 to 7 touches or something here.
It could be, but really the simplest path is just Mahomes doing everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know the Pacheco was just officially ruled out not too long ago here in the Sims. I did just take Pacheco down to 0, did the normalize and smart adjust here to get the Kareem Hunt stuff boosted. So when we run the sims here in a little bit, we'll make sure that we get the.
I doubt that Kareem Hunt is gonna have a projection that close to Travion Henderson.
Okay.
At least I don't know how it shakes up here, but like other sites or even like the prop markets, I don't think it's gonna be that close.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because Hunt, extremely live for touchdowns in this game environment, but it goes back to what you're saying. Is he actually going to see a 5 to 6 carry boost because Pacheco's out, or is he just going to be in the exact same role?
Right. Their offense is also very happy to make the pass game an extension of the run game because they have the guys now to do all of that.
Yep. Let's see here some other potential input volatility spots that could be, interesting for us. A big one is JJ McCarthy back at the helm for the Vikings. We get the dome game, Lions big team total. What do you see for the Vikings with McCarthy?
It's just kind of ugly from his to-date performance, but also one of those where like you're happy to play the Lions and you're happy to stack McCarthy. Just because it's like every week with the Vikings that they have these explosive playmakers that can carry the QB along, but it's slightly more appealing now with McCarthy rather than Wentz because he has his own rushing ability and also a greater sort of likelihood and out when it's like a garbage time scenario that he also gets something. Because he's the type that's going to want to still push in that spot where Wentz might just want to go home.
So you think there's maybe some appeal for just McCarthy double stacks to Jefferson and Addison?
Less so than I guess someone like Wentz because he can run for one, but definitely appeal in a single. And since these prices aren't that bad, if you include Hawkinson as well, the double's very much in play.
Yeah, Hawkinson down at 3,400. He's barely been relevant this year, but who knows? Maybe McCarthy kickstarts him a little bit.
Yeah, and Vikings don't always give the big play. I don't know at this point since sort of the way the defense took the league by storm last year. I think the league kind of adjusted. But the Lions can be pretty explosive and score quickly when they throw it a little bit, but it's usually not their MO. But it's like just having that ability to like go up, 21-0 pretty quickly could give that Minnesota side a big boost.
Do you have any thoughts on Jamison Williams? I think everybody's kind of given up the ghost as far as the breakout that Dan Campbell seemed to promise every time he was at the podium this summer. But in a game like this, is he a fast track guy that you'd be interested in?
Yeah, I would. Just that it's like something where if they can actually do whatever they want, I always like the guy who's been underperforming, or like that squeaky wheel situation where you want to have the guy lagging get more confidence in a game where you can do whatever you want, which is a real possibility here.
Yeah,
I actually like the Lions side here quite a bit, but that's a different story.
Yeah, what would be your preferred way to play the Lions?
I was talking about like as far as a bet, but like I don't know if any of these are that playable, at least in a vacuum. Just because they have there's a decent likelihood that a lot of their scoring comes through the running backs. It's just so hard to predict because there's 5 guys here that can do a lot of damage. That like if I'm playing Goff, I do want to double stack and just hope that it doesn't go to like the running backs unless you're stacking with Gibbs, which you could also do. It's just much cleaner, I think, to go the Minnesota way, even though I don't think they're going to do well. Almost like Detroit receiver or something, or like Jahmyr Gibbs, and then Minnesota stack would be how I play it.
I know you are loath to tout lines publicly, but it sounds like you like the Lions in a runaway here with the 8.5 point spread.
Yeah, I actually thought it wasn't going to stay that way at 8.5, but I think it's still there. So that actually spooks me a little bit, but I still like it.
All right, you're saying it spooks you that you got your action down and you didn't move the line globally?
Exactly. It's still the same days later. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. They're asleep at the wheel here. Let's talk about your favorite game of the week here, which even has a little bit of news involved as far as no Travis Hunter. But you mentioned to me you're liking this Raiders Jacksonville game.
Yeah, just like it's not even like it's a favorite game to me because I don't think it's like has a greater chance of success than anyone else. Other than that, both of these teams just got humiliated. One of them's off the bye, in addition, and they've both been playing rather poorly. So if there's like sort of a good spot to turn it around or break out a little bit, it would be like first week after the bye, or like extended bye in the Jags case.
Do you have a side of this game you like better from a DFS perspective?
Really not in particular. It's just I think the ownerships are too low. It's kind of getting overlooked a little bit more than it should. And there's not like all these like appealing environments to choose from. So this kind of stands out just from the ownership side. I would like Brian Thomas to like maybe get in the full practice. I don't know what happened this week, but Lawrence has actually been playing well as it is, and he's had some brutal matchups, and he's doing well in those matchups. Geno, not so much. Geno's been struggling pretty hard, but could be like a function of Bowers also being hurt. So he would be like a rather sneaky play if he were to just show some of that 2024 form.
Yeah,
we're probably a little low on him. I'd say at 10-3. I think I like him more than that.
Yeah, he really stands out this week on DraftKings, and I was talking about it with JM a little bit. No brace, coming off a long layoff. The team says he's fully healthy. I do think the three most popular players from this game, and however, if maybe that doesn't end up being prohibitive how popular they are, but I think it'll be Lawrence, BTJ, and Brock Bowers. Are there any pieces beyond that that interest you?
I think they're all stackable. Like even the Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, the running backs. It's sort of the one actually that I actually think you can get a lot of pieces from both sides.
Yeah. And I think my guess is there'll be a little bit more enthusiasm for the Lawrence stuff and people being like, I don't even have to guess if it's BTJ or Travis Hunter, they'll just play BTJ, but people want nothing to do with Geno Smith right now.
Right. He's been wildly inconsistent and more so to the downside, but he's had two amazing games too. So it's in there somewhere.
Yeah. How do you think that the success, like if Geno's cooking, do you think it means Genty's cooking as well? Or is it kind of similar to that Gibbs Goff and you just kind of want to play it one way?
Not so much just because them having any success is a win. So a lot of the times when it's like, I mean, Genty could also catch a pass here and there. So I don't think they're exclusive. And just them scoring touchdowns and getting points is going to pay off these salaries.
Yeah. Do you like the value on the Raiders secondary pass catchers more than on the Jags secondary guys?
I think so, but it might not be the case if Hunter's actually ruled out. Or he is ruled out. No, I don't. I think it's just different. The price points are different, so it's like it just depends on your build. Because you don't really always need like a 3.7, 3.8 guy, but a lot of times you are looking for like a mid-4s salary.
And I assume with a guy like Lawrence who will rush a little bit, maybe more open to a skinny stack, whereas with Geno you'd be double stacking.
Definitely. But again, like the prices are so, it's not like you're not being price sensitive by double stacking Lawrence here. That's sort of the whole appeal. You can basically get the same value and stay in the game as like if you were to go elsewhere. It's kind of like close to as good as values as you'll have.
Let's talk a little bit of chalk this week. And, we touched a little bit on maybe the Trevion Henderson stuff really gets steamed up. I mean, as far as like the superstar guys, it looks like it's going to be CMC and Jamar Chase as really popular. Do you have thoughts on those guys being good or bad chalk?
I would think that the Niners Giants game is deserving of the chalk just from what we've seen recently, in that the Niners defense is kind of sneaky terrible. Well, actually, it's just terrible, and it's only sneaky because there's a San Francisco in front of the team name. Like I was saying, like last week on this show, that I thought Houston D would just do well just because Houston would be able to control the clock and put up points every time they got the ball. And then that sort of would have like this Mac Jones in like playing catch up mode, having to throw a lot. And the Giants don't really sort of have the personnel and game plan to execute like that. They just want to play fast and not really control the ball. So if it's coming with like SF defense being inefficient, they could score. Obviously, Giants are willing to give up a lot of explosives too. So like the environment is actually good, and I think the market has caught on to that. And that's why you're seeing like a bunch of like these values come up from this game from teams that, especially SF, that hasn't really been doing that much. So I think it's good chalk. But also like the ownership probably gets so high that there's ways to sort of play it from different angles that are sharp too.
Do you have any thoughts on the wide receiver room? Juwan Jennings, Kendrick Bourne. I guess those would be the only two to really parse through.
Yeah, that's a little tough because if you're like looking at Mac Jones splits, it would be Bourne, but Jennings is a better player. And starting to ramp up with his health. Like he looks better right now too. So I would favor Jennings. I think everyone else does too, but also everyone probably is going to be all over McCaffrey as sort of the relative for price, like the best running back play on the slate, and even Kittle. So I actually think Mac Jones might be pretty chalk as a result.
Yeah, that's interesting too. And I agree with you. I think it lines up. If everybody likes CMC, Kittle, you toss in the Juwan Jennings value and you back your way into Mac Jones. And yet I haven't heard much positive sentiment about Mac Jones recently. So that might be one of those like sim projection versus the IKB players there.
Well, he's cheap, but now I guess since Henderson might be a play, it might siphon some of that ownership. Since you don't necessarily have to like go value at all these spots. I thought Tyrone Tracy looked good last week in his snaps. And Giants don't have too much target competition right now, so he should command some targets. It would be really good for SF if they had like one of their more alpha receivers in, since Giants are playing like 1v1 on the outside a lot, but they don't really have that guy.
Yeah. Do you think we see a little bit more of a ramp up from George Kittle, maybe trying to be that guy?
It's just hard for him because he's starting in the middle of the field most of the time. He's not out wide. So there's like natural help around him. Whereas like if a guy outside gets beat, it's kind of just over.
What is I know you mentioned Tracy, but good chalk or bad chalk, Tyrone Tracy at 5,100?
It would be good, especially with this Henderson news. And especially because you can correlate it a little bit with Giants DST, which is always like a decent play because they have this great pass rush, which like creates more variance for like the sacks and fumble recovery stuff. So there's a lot of plays on SF, so that kind of like allows for even greater pairing with the correlation as well as the anti-correlation of chalk with SF.
Right, because the teams that are using Tracy will probably be playing it as that game going crazy with Niners pieces, and you can kind of flip the script on it by playing it more of the Giants, Tracy, and all of that 49ers chalk.
Right. I mean, the Houston Texans just played like big ball control against SF. Like I said, the Giants aren't really suited to do the same thing, but the Niners might just be willing to concede something like that anyway. And if they do get behind, the Giants pass rush is pretty scary.
Well, I just got the new mega chalk on the slate, JM, because we just got news. DeAndre Swift is out. People are going to be jamming Kyle Monangai there. You should head over and look at that.
Yeah. Okay, well, maybe Travion Henderson's a good chalk now.
I was going to say it went from Tracy.
Yeah, Travion Henderson is the sneaky one
now. Snap reaction on this Bears backfield. 4,600 Kyle Monangai. I assume you see a little. Is Roschon Johnson even healthy right now? He didn't practice this week.
I don't believe he's healthy.
So how do you the Monangai? I'm going to assume we see him at like
maybe Travis Homer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Roschon DNP. He's not playing. I would expect Monangai to be projected higher than Travion Henderson because he has more touchdown equity. They have a much higher team total, and Drake May is more likely to run for one than Caleb Williams. But it's mostly game environment stuff, just like the Bengals are a better matchup.
Do you think, Monangai's been stylistically a little bit more of a north-south runner?
Exactly.
You think that has whereas Swift had been ripping off some of the big plays, you think it kind of slows the games down a little bit in scenarios where Monangai's successful?
I don't really think there's anything Swift can do that's like at a much better level, much higher level than Monangai at this point.
Yeah.
But Swift's been having a great year, so maybe that is the case. But historically, it's not like Swift has been a big mover of the needle.
Do you think this results, now that we get so much value opening up at running back, that we get maybe Jonathan Taylor catching a little bit more ownership because he's not as expensive if you compare him with this guy? And then I guess like the high-end wide receivers.
It would be Chase. Chase and Puka. Probably more Puka Chase. Puka and Chase more so than a Taylor.
Do you, when that kind of happens where it is funneling people to the studs and duds builds, how do you approach that? Do you try to middle it with more mid-price guys?
Not necessarily. It just depends on the rest of your team. I probably would just follow that trend, but not necessarily to the extent of the market. Mm-hmm. There's kind of fun ways to play Puka too, but it's gross.
All right, let me hear it because
it would it would be the Saints stacks. It would be
like Puka is the bring back,
or like Puka does his stuff, and now they're losing 30-7 in the fourth quarter. Kind of like last week when the Saints were absolutely slinging it just to no success. Well, maybe they can find success. They're still cheap. That's why Olave, they're not like dirt cheap, but the Tyler show is. Chris Olave is still cheap. Shaheed sort of outperforming the salary a little bit, but even like Juwan Johnson. So it's just like a close your eyes and see what happens.
I know we don't have a ton of tape on Tyler Show, but what do you think from Rattler as far as, I think he's a little less of a gunslinger. Is that check out for you?
As far as the decision making, yeah. But Rattler sort of has all the tools. It's just that he never does the right thing. So it's probably a bit of a stabilizing, a little bit of a stabilizing force, but it's not as though he was doing anything good last week. And that was in garbage time when in theory it should have been easy. So I'm not terribly confident in his abilities either.
Let's talk some contrarian lineups or contrarian plays so then we can run the sims and check out some of these lineups here. I was trying every which way to see if I could get JM to bite on the Packers passing game, and he was like, no, not for me. But it sounds like I can get you to sing Jordan Love's praises a little bit.
I like it. Just with Watson back, you might get some extreme efficiency. No one's going to be confident in the Panthers' ability, but just seeing a glimpse of it last week, and he played more snaps than I would have expected. I think he had 60-70% snaps. That the offense could just breathe much better with the lid lifter out there. So you're gonna get, actually you saw it, much better catch and run opportunities for Kraft and Romeo Dobbs. And even if you want to roster Watson himself, no one's gonna play him anyway because he's not gonna project well with that type of snap snap rate, like as a stack with Jordan Love, if you just throw in like 2% Watson with your like, I don't know, 10% Love or something, that's still enough to like get you over the top just because of his ability.
Yeah. Would Love stacks come preloaded with Kraft for you, or would you play?
No, not necessarily. And even Josh Jacobs, I looked this up before, but I would have thought they're like extremely not uncorrelated, just with how Josh Jacobs gets a lot of goal line touchdowns. But a lot of their big games have come together. So even Josh Jacobs is in play with Love, I'd say. Not necessarily Kraft even, but like Romeo Dubs, Christian Watson here and there.
Yeah. And then in these scenarios, because we know the Packers, deep down, they just want to run the ball. Like, do they need to get pushed by the Panthers for Jordan Love to reach his full ceiling?
I mean, I think deep down, like if it was like a big game, I would agree with that. But this game could just be a sort of like a fancy scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, why not just get Watson reps, like have a little fun with the passing game, right? Because it's not as like they know what Jacobs is.
Yeah.
They haven't had too many reps with like all the guys, and even now they don't, like, because Jordan or Jaden Reed's still hurt. But I don't know. It's just something that they can, if that's what they set out to do, they can do it because they might. It's kind of like a good chance they can do whatever they want.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess the one thing with Jacobs is they were giving Emmanuel Wilson a decent amount of work in that Steelers game last week. And you can see it reflected in the market shares here, 57% to 23%. Any concern about Wilson eating into that more?
I'm not sure. That seems like a little more of a one-off, but I haven't really looked into it.
Yeah. You mentioned the Tracy Giants ball control as a contrarian angle. Heading over to the Packers, the Colts and Steelers game. Sounds like you got a little interest in Aaron Rodgers here at 5,800.
Yeah, it's more of like a matchup type of angle. Well, first, Rodgers started the season, if you remember, extremely slowly, but he's been playing really well lately. They've also been throwing it more. Part of it is that like Jalen Warren and Gainwell, they're kind of a little more like receiving centric. So that kind of props up some of the passing yards a little bit for a guy like Rodgers. But I noticed that like with the Colts, it's like they're extremely good at stopping wide receiver one. And that's because they have like Charvarius Ward, Kenny Moore, good safety play. To the point where it's like the efficiency is terrible, and the league recognized that at some point, and they don't even like target. And so it gets reflected in that like the linebackers aren't great in coverage, and then like every other position like on the field offensively, like tight end, running back, wide receiver 2, 3, gets like boosted in a big way. So they sort of have the guys in those positions like a Calvin Austin, Jalen Warren, Jonnu Smith. It's more from that angle, and then Indy has some ability to score quickly too. So
it sounds like if you are playing Rodgers, though, you don't really want to do it with Metcalf.
I would certainly do it here and there because there's plenty of time Metcalf can overcome, but just stylistically and from the matchup side, it's like the middle of the field is kind of open against Indy.
If you were doing a Rodgers stack, do you like the idea of including a chalky Jalen Warren, or would you be trying to sidestep around that?
I'm not sure Jalen Warren's chalky now, but I would try to include him just because it's like part of the whole thesis here. Pitt defense is also a little similar to like the Giants, where they're also heavy man and weak to wide receiver one, but Colts do that pass game by committee, I'd say. So in theory, actually, like Alec Pierce would be the most undeniable guy for that scenario, just because like of his speed and size combination. A little more likely than usual to get loose from that type of coverage. And so like I'm not opposed to like even Daniel Jones, Alec Pierce. Pitt also doesn't really have good safety play.
Yeah. I mean, the thing we've been wanting all year for the Colts is for them to get pushed and to actually have to try to score points in the fourth quarter. I mean, does this seem like a spot where that could happen?
I mean, it still seems more likely that they don't get pushed, and then Pitt has to answer a little bit. Yeah, I don't necessarily see them not having the lead, but it's still like Rodgers has been playing well enough that I wouldn't be surprised, and he's been throwing it enough that like he could speed up the game.
Yeah. Of the secondary pass catchers, you did mention Calvin Austin. Obviously, there's the tight ends. After Metcalf, who is your favorite of the pass catchers? Would you say?
Yeah, Calvin, then Jonnu Smith, just because he plays a little more when they're trailing too, because he can't really pass, he can't really block that well. He's out there to catch balls.
Yeah. Actually, let me see here. I was going to run some sims. Let me make sure. Did I nuke? Yes. All right. Swift is, we got rid of him here. So we're going to run some sims here. Obviously, a ton of late breaking news. I mean, we've had like chalk plays from Tyrone Tracy and Jalen Warren perhaps go to what? Those guys might go from like 25% down to 10% with these news pieces.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Manungai would be like 40 or at least 30.
Yeah. So of Manungai versus Trevion Henderson, and let's, do, ownership adjusted favorite play between those two.
If it's ownership adjusted, I think it's Henderson, just because I've made some assumptions that most wouldn't. Whereas the Manungai is very straightforward. Like he's going to have a really good projection, and it's not going to be off because that's Travis Homer.
Yeah. And then of Warren and Tracy, assuming they both come down to similar levels, favorite between those two.
I mean, those actually I just both like. So
okay,
I'm not picking favorites there.
All right. Well, and it makes sense because you said you liked the Tracy defense angle, and then you liked Warren and Rodgers as part of that game.
Yeah, I also just like what I saw out of Tracy. He looks pretty fresh, and there's no competition.
The chat is mentioning Trevor is on IR there for the Colts.
Yeah, I mean they still have Kenny Moore, who's number one cornerback on most teams. But yeah, there is less merit to what I just said.
So there you go. But still high, a lot of interest in the passing game there for the Steelers.
Oh, nice. So you got the Manungai in here already.
Yeah. I just did the smart adjust there, which I should mention. Anytime the inputs aren't updated from the RTS side, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he's going to have more than 14.3 as a projection, but that's fine.
Yeah, more than.
Oh, I see. A lot of his stuff went to Caleb.
Oh, a lot of his rushing angle. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's, I mean, even looking at this here,
that's kind of true though. Like it is, Caleb will have more rushing equity.
Yeah, and so even with that, I mean, I guess Manungai, he showed up with an 11.2% optimal rate. That'll probably come up once that projection gets fine-tuned. But this still gives us a good baseline to look at some of these lineups, and a lot of these takes kind of popping up here. Trevor Lawrence, the third best lineup here, of Brian Thomas to Parker Washington. No Raiders bring back here. There's a couple other Lawrence lineups here, a Diame and Parker Washington paying down, another Diame. Oh, here's a triple.
So mostly I don't think we're getting the Raiders because we might be low on their pass game. Like I would expect someone like Bowers. It could just be like the recency stuff and Sim not really tying it to health issues.
Yep. So with that would be a situation where you would go and boost them a little bit to try to see which lineup is the best. We didn't talk a ton about the Chiefs. Obviously, we're seeing two Patrick Mahomes lineups here at the top. One to Rashee Rice, one a triple with Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Kelsey. That's interesting.
Maybe it's just on to the Pacheco funneling to Mahomes. I don't think that's wrong. So I don't think that's a bad chalk. It might come up as a little chalkish now because you're more likely to be able to afford a 7K quarterback.
Here's the Rodgers to Metcalf, the fourth lineup here. The full lineup would also have Henderson, CMC, Diggs, Parker Washington, Kittle, Rashee Rice, Titans. That looks like a nice lineup.
Yeah, well, we'll have to have a little bit of the sanity check with Parker Washington, because it seems like he's just going full Travis Hunter here, which I'm not certain of.
I mean, on the one hand, he is not Travis Hunter. On the other hand, sometimes when I watch Trevor Lawrence play football, I think he thinks Parker Washington is Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
But you're right. That adjust here.
Like that, the 1 to 3 looks a little too tight as far as like their scores. It's looking a little bit like the Chargers or something.
Yeah, yeah. Which again, like, doesn't seem that far off the way Trevor Lawrence spreads the ball around. But yeah, those probably should come down a smidge. But in that case, then where does it go? Does it just all go to Brian
it would be like Thomas like 16 or something, and then maybe a little more to tight end running backs.
Yeah. Let's see here. Let's look at a couple other lineups here. Should I look for some love lineups?
I can't imagine those.
Yeah.
There you go. It's not bad.
Yeah, this top one, 126.51% EV. It's a love double to Watson and Dobbs. You get Warren, McCaffrey, Amon-Ra, Kittle. There's Parker Washington showing up everywhere. Texans. But that I like that love double.
Yeah. And even the McCaffrey and Kittle together, that's not necessarily a bad thing to do without the quarterback or even a Giants piece, just because they have such a good total, and McCaffrey gets a lot of his stuff through the air, like reception wise.
Let's see here. Could I find a Tracy with the Giants defense angle here? Let's see. Here is a Caleb Williams to Rome lineup that has the Tracy New York Giants. Obviously, no Niners in this one. It has Genty, Amon-Ra, Metcalf, Dalton Kincaid. That's kind of a funky lineup there.
Right. I mean, I would try to get maybe Jamar Chase in this one.
With what's the because you're
if it was Caleb Rome at least.
Gotcha. I got you. I see what you're saying there. Just those scenarios where you want to be playing the fragility of the Bears passing game.
It just doesn't seem like a game where you just go skinny stack and that's it.
Yeah. And again, for the people, and we've mentioned this before, I don't have any constraints on the sim, so it's not forcing any double stacks or bringbacks or anything. We're just kind of seeing what stuff, bubbles up here to the top.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you think I can get the sims to like a Tyler Shug lineup here?
Oh God. I mean, they don't love it, but it's there.
Yeah. I mean, you have to go down to the 5th lineup to even find unstacked or a non-unstacked Tyler Shug. Yeah.
He's got the double.
So you go Tyler to Rashid Shaheed and Olave, Genty, James Cook, Rashee Rice, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Denver Broncos there.
I'm not even going to say that's a play though. Like 3%, you're well over the field. If you're on Tyler Shug.
What is it? I mean, we just briefly touched on Mahomes. We haven't really talked about the Bills at all. Like, how do you see that game?
I'm guessing it's like the prices, especially the stack, is like so exorbitant right now. But maybe it's not the case with the running back value. That's been sort of the issue with Josh Allen for years now, since Diggs left, that like no one's like dominating snaps from the receiver position or even like targets.
It makes it so hard. Like if you were to play a Josh Allen lineup, are you just like tossing in Kincaid and then like a couple Chiefs pieces?
Yeah, or it doesn't have to be a couple Chiefs, but like Kincaid isn't like none of these guys are really getting played, so you might as well take like the like points per dollar in Kincaid.
Yeah.
Well, no, but they're all fine. It's not like they're like Shakir and Coleman. They're actually cheaper than they've been, just probably because like James Cook been getting all the points.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm not gonna like I'm a little surprised that it's not showing up at all, and I would expect like even I would probably play some Josh Allen.
I don't know why or how this is happening. And again, these specific Josh Allen lineups I have on screen right now aren't grading out super well, but they seem to involve a lot of Lions players with them.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's maybe just randomness, I'd say. But yeah, no, the first one is like egregious.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a Gibbs, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta there. I mean, I assume on that team, it's just like, let me swap out Allen for Laporte or Goff
Yeah.
and end up elsewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, it's up to you guys now to go and mess with the inputs, bully the Sims, if you will. Go check out what lineups you like. And obviously there's going to be a lot of movement over the next 24 hours as projections, both ownership and true projections are updated. So it seems like we're set for another wild week after last week's, AJ Brown, Drake London, late scratches there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying to figure out the pieces.
All right. Well, Yuda, do you have any Halloween plans for tonight? Are you going to be dressing up as anything?
No plans of now. Just grinding here.
All right. And that is what we are going to be doing as well. I'm going to be hopping over right now to do Often on the Clock, an underdog slate breakdown with John and Nez. If you're watching here, you should be automatically redirected over there. If not, just go check out the video on my YouTube channel. Appreciate all of you guys in the chat. Shout out to Yuda, to JM, and everyone who has been offering up suggestions and comments in the chat. And we will see you guys next time for the